And we are live, folks. Welcome to Strange Journeys. I'm your ghost host, Tom. And over here we got the ghost guy, Tim. And down here is Lewis. And we appreciate y'all being here. Uh, we're taking a strange journey today off the main roads and into the misty trails and shadowy forests of our state and national parks and other forests, hence the name Trail of Shadows, sharing some of the tales of high strangeness that have occurred on these dark footpaths. But first, we want to take care of some housekeeping. But we want you to remember that these shows are provided for you, the watchers, for your entertainment. We are not by any means and do not claim to be scholars or experts in any of the topics we choose to cover. We're simply enthusiasts and storytellers who have fun with these topics while doing our best to respect individual beliefs. And please remember that this show is live and nothing is rehearsed or edited out later. What you see is what you get. And I wish it'd been funny if Lewis had waited a few minutes. Just before we went live and then came back just as we were going live. So you could have done that on camera, just brushed out your beard for everybody.
Oh, no.
There's one guy on TikTok that does instructional videos how to take care of your beard, and he's got a big old long beard down to here. So
Oh, wow. I
Uh,
probably need to look at him for advice.
well, that was the problem I went into with mine when mine got down long like that. It's just, combing it out, and it was just, I am
Mhm.
low maintenance. I mean, when I let my hair grow down to below my shoulders and having to brush it out every night and every morning, I just like, no.
Mm,
I had my long beard and long hair, and Tim's having difficulty, so he'll be back in a second. But yeah, I could have used those, but like I said, I'm low maintenance, so I just had to cut it off. I just can't deal with it, and I mean, I brush my beard out every morning, but you
yeah.
know, I keep it short, close contained. So
Mhm.
anyway, I was saying we are live, and the only exception to that is our revisited shows where we go back and I edit down previous shows. We're in season 2 right now of our revisited, and and then our night treks are normally pre-recorded, but last night we had that special edition of a live night treks, and it was so wild. Tim telling this, uh, well, it was like a modern story attached to an old legend in Kansas about this creature that that you couldn't say his name. If you said its name, I don't know if it's he or she, but if you said its name, it would appear and take a young woman away as a bride. And
Ooh.
him, I mean, the story he told was like a new version of a guy with a similar last name, and him going to try to figure out what his name means. And oh, it was
Oh,
crazy.
my.
And so you'll have to go back and watch that one, guys. It's on our YouTube channel under the playlist Night Treks. And then the week before that, since we're only live 2 weeks, we usually have two Night Treks in between shows. So the week before that was an old H.P. Lovecraft story called The Cats of Ulthar. That was a strange tale. And if you're into H.P. Lovecraft, I mean, it had spells, incantations, possibly it had strange, our cats acting strangely. It had death. It had, I mean, it was crazy. Possible ancient Egyptian connections. I mean, it was crazy. So, and we're not sure what our next night treks is going to be because if y'all noticed anything that we usually do this week to week, I don't have a whole schedule of night treks laid out. I've got things in mind I want to do, but as far as what we're doing, I haven't.
I've I've
Yeah.
got a story.
Oh, good, good. Well,
So, yeah.
we'll have to meet up and get that recorded. And unless you
Okay.
want to do it live on a Friday night, that's what Tim ended up doing. He's
Mm.
like, yeah, I know, 10 o'clock on a Friday nights, as we tend to get some age on us gets later and later. So anyway, we'll get together and get that recorded. I've got there's a couple that I want you to do.
Okay.
Some of I don't know if I should let the cat out of the bag, but it's just kind of unique. I found a website. It's kind of a wiki website, but it lists all these strange tales from back in the 20s and 30s and 40s, and some of them have the actual text completed.
Okay.
And there's one of them in there that is just there's two or three that I just really want to do, and one of them is set in England, and I can't do accents, so I'll let you read it and see if you might be able to pull something off there. So,
all right.
But be watching. Where'd it go? Be watching for Night Trek. Now, our last revisited show was Fairy Tales. We played. I've mentioned this before, but StreamYard, the service we use, only allows 1 hour on pre-recorded videos, so I have to split these in two. And what I've decided to do this season is our revisited shows. We're playing parts 1 and 2 back to back. So last Saturday, if you were watching, you saw Fairy Tales 1 and Fairy Tales 2 with Elizabeth Parker. And those were fun shows to do. She is such an amazing lady. And we had a blast with her. So go back and check those out. Parts 1 and part 2 are on YouTube. And you can watch them there. Next Saturday will be Have You Seen Me? Our show on doppelgangers. So we share a lot of tales about doppelgangers being seen. So that was a really cool show, and we had a blast doing it. Now, remember, you can support the show through Patreon at Strange Journeys, PayPal me, Strange Journeys, Venmo at Strange Journeys, Cash App, and $ Strange Journeys. We appreciate every bit of support you can get. We appreciate our patrons on Patreon. You guys are keeping us going, and I need to get on there and update the site and provide some things that we've been promising and just hadn't got on there yet. So but if you don't want to do a monthly commitment, that's why we added the PayPal, the Venmo, and the Cash App, so that you can, if you're watching the show and say, hey, I want to, zip these guys a little bit of money, just go on your Venmo or Cash App or PayPal me and help us out there. We'd certainly appreciate it. And you can also go to strangestuff.live, where you can get all things Strange Journeys. You can get your Watchers t-shirt, your Strange Journeys pillow, Strange Journeys mug, and all kind of other stuff. So hopefully, Tim said he was having some internet issues, so hopefully he'll be back soon. But before we go any further, we just ask you to remember, as you're watching on YouTube,
click that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.
Exactly. Thumbs up and subscribe. We need you to do that, and we would certainly appreciate it if you would. So, are we ready to get into the show?
Yes, sir.
All righty, here we go. into the unknown, into the unseen, the unexplainable, and the unbelievable. Join our strange journeys. Are you ready? Yes.
Wow.
Are you ready? Oh, you like the new intro?
Yeah. Looks great.
Thank you.
Sounds great.
Well, that's actually one of my original tunes from my CD.
Okay.
I found a website that would take the lyrics off instead of paying somebody, and it normally starts with this thunder and rain, heavy thunderstorm sound effects, but somehow when I removed the lyrics, it gave it this strange, weird sound. So I'm like, I've got to use that. So I've actually been wanting to
Awesome.
use that song since we started, because the lyrics in the chorus are always been a little different. Stand out in the storm always seemed just a little bit strange. Stand out from the
Yeah.
norm, and it's talking about being a left-handed guitar player and going my own way. But the name of the song is Left Wing Radical, which is what I titled my CD, and I never got any sales. And it hit me
Ooh.
one day, I just out of the blue, I was like, oh my God, that sounds political. And it has nothing to do with politics, because when I wrote this was when that term right wing radical had come out and was being
Yeah.
batted around. And so I thought, well, that'd be a cool play on words to talk about my left-handed songwriting and call it left wing radical. But I guess, people saw it as a political thing and wouldn't buy my CD. And so when I changed, a few years later, I changed everything up, changed the cover artwork, and got a new title track called I Don't Want to Leave. I started selling CDs. So, but it's a creepy sounding song. And so I decided to use it and put some voiceover on it and just had fun with it. I really set that up while we were on vacation, our short vacay a few month or two ago in our break on here.
Okay.
And started working on it. It took me a couple of weeks to actually get it the way I wanted it. So now we have a new intro. I was wanting to do that last season, but with all the crap that went on with me the latter part of last year, I just went with what we had. So, but anyway, we're getting into the show now. We're going off the main roads and into the undergrowth. We're going to share tales of high strangeness from people who have hiked these dark trails and what they've experienced. Now, we've garnered several stories from Ranker.com, Weird History, Graveyard Shift, Reddit, and other online sources. And I think Lewis has some stories that he's uncovered. Tim, hopefully he'll get back soon. And Tim actually has some personal stories because he is a hiker. He, a few months ago, he actually went off on his own and parked his car and got his backpacking gear and walked off into the woods and didn't come home till about 3 or 4 days later. So
wow.
Tim is a serious hiker. So I've divided this into a couple of categories. Now you'll see as we go through these that I'm not necessarily focusing on what people expect, the Bigfoots, the I mean, we do have some ghost type stories in here, and I think Lewis has got some of those.
Mhm.
But we're not. I tried to stay away from the obvious, and I'm going to read this first one, Lewis. Then you can read the next, and
Okay.
if what you have fits into this category, let me know. It might fit in
Okay.
another category. I don't know. But we're going to start with strange voices heard in the woods. This person says, I'm not a ranger, but I went camping on a mountain with a friend. We had a fire going and we're just chatting and messing with the fire when I heard a very faint sound that distracted me from our conversation. I told my friend to hush for a second and we both listened closely. We could hear a woman singing in the distance, what sounded like a really old medieval melody. We couldn't make out what it was because it seemed she was singing in another language. We were far and away from any other campsite, as we like to camp in our own spots, away from anything that could potentially have other people. This creeped us out, but what makes it really freaky is I ended up posting pictures of our camp on Facebook, and another friend recognized the location and asked, had I heard anything weird? Okay, so I responded, why do you ask? He went on to explain how he and another of our four mutual friends were near that same campsite on a different night and with one of their dogs, and they heard a woman crying as she was coming down the road that passes by the site. They decided to check on her to see if she was all right, but when they got to the road and called out to her, there was no response and the crying immediately stopped. Well, they thought it was strange, but decided to head back to camp. When they got back, they found their dog convulsing by the fire and foaming at the mouth. They grabbed him and got in their car and started hightailing it down the mountain. He said their dog went limp in his arms on the way down and he thought it had died. But once they reached the bottom of the mountain, the dog woke up immediately and acted like nothing had happened. They immediately assumed there was something evil in that area. Well, when he was telling me this story, I turned white as a ghost. Once he finished, I explained that what my other friend and I had heard near our camp. It really freaked me out because my buddy with the dog ended up going up the mountain with me and showed me where everything went down, which happened to be the exact same spot where I was hearing the singing the night I went camping.
Wow.
Yeah, that put chills down you. I
Mhm.
mean, one of them here's singing. He said an old medieval song. I don't know how he recognized that, or unless he
Mhm.
had heard it before. And then a woman crying, and the thing with the dog. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, at first I would say a spider bite, but once they got down the mountain and the dog got better, like nothing had happened.
Yeah.
Oh, that's strange.
Okay.
All right, Lewis, go into the next story.
I was a ranger for Glacier National Park in northern Montana. We got a call around 3 a.m. ish for a camper in distress near our post that would require a 45-minute hike through some pretty rocky terrain to get there. So we geared up and started hiking. My partner and I are about 30 minutes into the hike when I just get this gut feeling that something isn't right. Keep in mind it's pitch black and we're only using headlamps in the middle of grizzly territory. We are about 10 miles out and we start to hear this sound of a baby crying.
Ooh.
So we kick it into high gear and start shouting and moving faster until I realized uh, something odd and my gut completely dropped. The sound of the child crying was played on a loop. It was the same cry over and over and over again. I told my partner to stop and listen to prove that I wasn't going crazy.
Yeah.
He was a new hire, and I saw all the color drain out of the kid's face as he realized that the sound was on a loop. We decided to hightail it out of there, fearing for our lives and the unknown. We never got another call of a stranded camper after we left. I still get chills telling the story.
Uh. and they get a phone call and they go to where there's supposedly a stranded
Yeah.
camper. So do you think somebody was setting them up?
Hmm.
You know, I mean, it could have been a
Yeah.
fake phone call and got those guys out there, but still,
Yeah.
I mean, he realized something was up because he noticed that it was the same sound over and over and over again.
Hmm.
Wow. Uh, some of these stories kind of makes me wish I'd been a park ranger. I'm like, God, if these guys are getting this kind of stuff out there. Let me just back up a second. One thing we didn't want to do is go over a lot of the missing people. You know, David Politis and his Missing 411 is awesome, and I highly recommend you watching his movies, reading his books. If you haven't seen or heard from David Politis, please do. Um,
Hmm.
some of the missing cases are just profoundly weird. You know,
Yeah.
like these people shouldn't be missing, but they are.
Yeah.
You know, and some of them were missing and then found later 15, 20 miles off where they couldn't have
Hmm.
hiked to in that amount of time. So
Oh yeah.
I purposely didn't add any missing stories, which you can find a ton of them on YouTube. I wanted to go for something a little more offbeat. Um, maybe one day when we get prestigious, we could have David Politis on here. But what I've seen of him, he'd probably do it anyway. I don't know. But anyway, he's got some wild stuff. So let's go on with some strange voices. This person says, I didn't see, but I heard. My husband and I were hiking in a state park on the East Coast. It was midday during the work week, so we may have encountered two other people the 3 hours we were out and about. The only sounds we heard were from ourselves, our dog, and some birds or animals. All of a sudden, I heard a mild chanting. I asked my husband if he had heard it too, and he nodded, but signaled for me to be quiet. My dog's ears were up at full alert, and the hair was standing. His hackles had raised. We continued walking, and the noises turned into full blown monk chanting. Think Halo Gregorian chant. Now, this must be a younger person because I wouldn't have thought Halo. I would have thought Gregorian chants because what back in the
Yes.
90s, the monks put
Oh
out
yeah.
a CD or something of their
Hmm.
Gregorian chants, and it was
Yeah.
the rage. But I wouldn't have thought Halo, but obviously a younger experiencer here. And they said it was clear as day, like I was standing next to a speaker. To make myself feel better, I've convinced myself some teens were hiding down there, playing it on their phones. After 5 minutes of hearing it, it disappeared, and we barely spoke a word the last 3 miles back. It still creeps me out. But that would be creepy. Out in the
Hmm.
middle of the woods to hear a Gregorian
Yeah.
chant, you'd think you would come upon a monastery or something.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
you know, wow. All right. More
Okay.
strange voices.
There's a Civil War battleground site in Louisiana called Port Hudson that has a little museum and some cool trails through the forest with interpretive signs talking about the events that happened there during the Civil War. I went there alone in the middle of a weekday, so I had the place completely to myself. I was probably a mile into the woods checking out a former campsite when I started hearing voices coming down the trail the way I had come in. It sounded like at least 10 people all talking excitedly in fairly loud voices, distinct enough that I fully expected to see a school field trip group come into the clearing at any moment. Except then it just stopped.
Wow.
Never saw another human being.
Wow. I mean, we've all done that. We've heard people in the distance walking toward us, and we
Hmm.
step out and we see the group of people. And that's what this person was expecting. He
Yeah.
expected to walk out and see people walking by, and there was
Hmm.
nothing there. Didn't you tell us of it was in our uh, Strange Highways show. Um, this couple or somebody was standing by the road and they heard voices and they looked up and they saw this group of people walking down and they were all dressed in
Oh,
Period
Yes,
clothing,
yes.
something
That
like
that
that.
was near the Memorial Church in Jamestown.
Okay.
And they were people in colonial dress who appeared to
Wow.
be going to church.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, they heard them talking first, or is
Yeah.
if I understood it correctly, and
Oh
they
yeah.
turned and they saw a group of people, and they
Yeah.
saw some kind of manifestation, whether it was a time loop or a
Right.
residual haunting or whatever it was. That's what this story reminded me of. All right, one more of the strange voices before we go on to a different category. Lisa, who lives in New York City and didn't want to use her last name, was once hiking in southern Utah with a friend when they heard a woman's voice, loud and clear, moaning in pain. The voice seemed to come from behind a nearby boulder, but when they ran over to help, there was no one there. Back at Red Mountain Resort, where Lisa and her friend were staying, they told a guide about the weird incident. The guide replied that indeed a lot of spirits are believed to reside in the area. And Lisa said, I can still hear the woman's moans to this day. It was so eerie.
Wow.
The guide acted like, yeah, they, we, yeah, we got spirits here. Oh,
Oh
okay.
yeah.
You're not the first one, and you won't be the last. Okay, this next section I called Strange People or Apparitions because some of these are just a little different and unique. This is where some ghost aspects come in. So if you got some strange sightings like that, Lewis, you
Hmm.
can share them here.
Okay.
But this first one, this guy says a buddy of mine is a Marine and was doing an exercise deep in the woods with his unit one day, and he eventually got lost. After walking around for about an hour trying to figure out where he was, he came across three guys and asked them for directions. They pointed him in the direction of his camp, and he was able to get back. Shortly after he got back, he and his unit started to pack to leave, so he told his sergeant that there were still guys out in the woods. His sergeant said that he was the last one back, and they were waiting on him to be able to leave. He told his buddy about it, and it turns out that another unit that did exercises in that area way back in the day, not sure when that is, had three Marines go missing. And there have been other Marines that got lost in that same area that say that they have had the same experiences of running into three guys that pointed them in the right direction. Now, that's some helpful ghost saying.
Hmm.
I mean, it's just kind of uh, wild, you know. He gets lost and gets help, but he's not the only one that's gotten help. And so
Hmm.
supposedly, these three Marines that initially went missing are still must have died out there, and they're still helping other Marines find their way back to their units.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. All right, Lewis, you got something to add, or you want to go into the next one?
Um, I'll just go ahead and add. This is the story that I posted on my blog today. This is a story from Kings Mountain Battlefield in upstate South Carolina. This is a battlefield from the American Revolution, and during the battle that was fought there, Major Patrick Ferguson was the British officer leading the troops. And during the course of the battle, he's riding his horse back and forth, rallying his troops. And one of the Patriot soldiers got a clear shot at him and was able to shoot him off of his horse. And so he was shot and he fell from his horse. But when he fell off his horse, his foot remained in one of the stirrups.
Oh,
And so the horse ended up dragging him over to the Patriot line. And
oops.
one of the Patriot soldiers approached him, and Major Ferguson pulled out his gun and shot the guy. And moments later, the major's body was riddled with bullets from the other
Well,
Patriot
yeah.
soldiers. And they then went so far as to strip the body and urinate on his corpse. So he was buried right there where he fell on the battlefield,
Mm,
and he was a Scottish soldier, so they buried him under a cairn, which is it's essentially a pile of rocks
rocks, yeah.
over the burial site. And these are commonly used really around the world to mark the grave of heroes. And it is tradition that when you visit the cairn, you add a rock to the pile. But it also serves a practical purpose in that it keeps the animals from getting to the remains,
Right.
and supposedly it's also supposed um, to trap the spirit there and prevent the
Mhm.
spirit from getting out and roaming around. So some years ago, there was a pair of reenactors who were staying camping on the battlefield as part of a reenactment, and they decided to walk down this trail one evening, and it was the trail that walks past the cairn marking Major Ferguson's grave. And so they both picked up rocks and they added those rocks to the pile. And as they turned to walk away, they both sensed there was somebody standing there. And they both turned
Oh,
and they realized that they were seeing the figure of Major Ferguson
wow.
standing there in, his full British military dress. And he's standing there and he's kind of smiling, and he starts laughing and he says something to the effect of, "Well, it doesn't always work that way, boys." And referring to the fact that
Wow.
the stones are supposed to keep his spirit in the grave. So, of course, the reenactors were rather shocked to see that, and eventually
Yeah.
the figure kind of faded into the shadows. But
Wow.
just know that if you're visiting Major Ferguson's grave, that he may be standing nearby
He may
watching.
visit you. Wow.
Yes.
Okay, that's amazing. Uh, yeah, I mean, I've seen those rock cairns.
Hmm.
I mean, in England, they build them. If it
Oh
was a
yeah.
king or important person, they build them pretty big. But here in the
Yes.
States, it's usually small ones. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, I'd heard that about it keeping the spirits in. I guess you'd have to have a particular kind of rock.
Perhaps.
If you just grabbed any old rock, it may not work. All right, in the next story, this woman is kind of long, so I'm going to try my best to condense it for you.
Okay.
She was said she was traveling solo in the Olympic Peninsula in Olympic National Park in Washington State. She said her road dead ended at the edge of the Quinault River, and there was an ancient footbridge that went across, but it didn't look too safe, so she decided that she would not cross it. She was off season. She was not in a tourist area. She said it was hot outside and she just needed to get into the water. So she undressed. She didn't have a swimsuit. She undressed down to her underwear and pushed through the thick brush down an embankment to the edge of the water. Um, she said after a few minutes, she felt like she was being watched. And so she started to climb out. And when, as she was walking out, she turned to look to make sure she had gotten everything. And when she did, she saw on the other side of the river a big, tall man standing in plain view. But he was higher up the embankment than she was on her side. He was wearing a poncho made of animal pelts, long hair full of sticks and twigs, and it looked like he'd been living in the wild for some time. She said they stared at each other for a moment, and then all of a sudden he took off in the direction of the footbridge. So see, she grabbed her car keys, tried to grab her clothes and shoes. As she was running, she got entangled in some blackberry vines. And as she was fighting to get out of those, she lost her clothes and her shoes. And so she's trying to make it back to her car before he made it across the river. She said she finally made it out of the blackberries and he was crossing the bridge headed toward her rapidly. She got to the car, flung the door open just as he arrived. She locked the doors and he pounded on the hood of the car, screaming and grunting non-verbally. She said, when he reached for my driver's door, I hit the gas and took off as fast as I could. She looked back and he continued to chase her. He must have run after my car for at least a mile until he faded from view. She said, I was bleeding everywhere from running nearly naked through the blackberries. I was wet, unclothed, shaking and crying. Had I hesitated for literally even 10 seconds, I don't think I would have made it out alive. She said, even typing out this story again all these years later, I start to shake. And she says, I felt like I was being hunted. I will never, ever go back to that area. She says, since that moment, I always bring a hiking buddy with me when I venture into the forest. Wow. I mean, that's something out of a movie. I just, to imagine it happen in real life, that is scary and creepy. Could it be just a man of the woods, a wild man, as they called him? I don't know. Well, this next one is really strange. I found one or two of these type stories that is just off the wall strange. Lewis, you want to tell us about it?
All right. My husband and I were hiking up a mountain in the Pacific Northwest. It's perpetually muddy due to a large number of waterfalls along the sides of the trail, so there's no way you can avoid getting at least a little dirty. Around an hour and a half up the trail, we passed two men wearing black suits, black hats, black glasses, holding black leather briefcases, and wearing black dress shoes. Completely clean dress shoes and
Wow.
immaculately clean pressed pants. Not a spot of dirt or wrinkle on either of their clothes.
Wow.
As we passed each other, one of them whispered something in German. I looked back at them, and they were both standing still and looking back at us, staring. It was all so surreal.
Surreal is a good word.
Yeah,
You know what my first thought was?
Men in Black?
Men in Black.
Oh, yeah.
That's what it sounds like. But what would they be doing out in the woods in the Pacific Northwest?
Yeah.
That's just odd. I mean, and she said they were speaking in German. She may have, I don't know, unless she speaks German and understood what it was or was familiar with it. I think if I had seen something like that and seen people like that out on the road, I would be so confused and disoriented I wouldn't be able to recognize their language at all. I don't think.
Yeah.
But black suits, black glasses, black hats, and holding black leather briefcases. I mean, that's wild. This next one is kind of funny because they said what they saw was myself. No, literally, I saw myself in the woods. Same clothes, same hair, same body shape, everything. I couldn't see the face, though. It was just me running through the forest. I was like 6 or 7 at the time with another 7-year-old friend. We left the forest when I saw that, and I never asked him if he saw it. So did she see her doppelganger? Wow. We're talking about doppelgangers next week and revisited, so come back for that. But did this little girl see her doppelganger? And, that's one thing is, I don't study doppelgangers all the time, but when I have and listened to videos on it and read on the subject, they can't get everything just perfect usually. Something's usually off. She said she couldn't see her face. Maybe they couldn't get the face just right. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
but she saw her doppelganger. Excuse me. All right, Lewis.
All right. I was part of a 3-person trail crew. We were a good 26 miles from the trailhead. We were working on diverting the existing trail from an eroding cliff. This new trail was going to be a 7-mile diversion, and so we were 5 miles into building the new trail, about another half day until we linked up with the old trail. It's mid morning, so we decided to take a quick break. I leave my 2 crew members to go answer nature's call, so I
Wow.
am digging a cat hole to go in when I hear someone whistling a tune. I just assumed it was my crew, so I call out that this place is occupied. The whistling stopped and it was quiet. Then it started again. It moved just below where I'm standing. Down the hill, I see 2 men. Both men were dressed in black suits and top hats, carrying canes, just casually walking in the middle of the wilderness. No
Wow.
packs, no water bottles, looking like they were taking a stroll in a park after an opera. I don't think, and I just start walking back to my crew, way freaked out.
Wow.
I told them what I saw, and we all went back and just caught the 2 men leaving.
Wow.
One of my crew screamed down at them and waved. They ignored us and just kept casually walking until they were out of sight. They weren't using any of the trails, just walking in between trees. It
Wow.
was just a weird and freaky experience for all 3 of us. I don't think we hardly slept that night. We finished our trail the following morning and raced back to civilization. And we made a note in our weekly report, just in case those people did get lost out there.
Yeah, that'd be really lost. Top hats,
Hmm.
suits, and top hats on out in the wilderness. I mean, and here's the unique thing about this story. Usually, when people see something like this, they go tell their
Hmm.
friends, and they come back. What? It's gone.
Oh
But
yeah,
not this time. He goes
yeah,
tells his crew that he's working with, and they come back, and they all see him
hmm,
walking away into the bushes.
yeah,
I mean, how often does that happen in these sighting stories? Hardly ever.
yeah.
But you know, I mean, the men in black, and then these guys. I mean, this is really strange stuff, guys.
Yes.
Here's one going back to kind of what Lewis was talking about. A Civil War reenactor at Gettysburg swears that he saw a man dressed in a Civil War attire looking bloody and tired, but he wasn't part of the show. The man handed the actor a box of cartridges and then disappeared. It sounds almost too hard to believe, except the actor has proof of his encounter. When the ghost vanished, the bullets remained. And guess what? He says they are genuine Civil War cartridges. Now, the only thing I take issue with, and it just may have been a misnomer, but I don't think they used cartridges during the Civil War. I think they were still shooting because that's when they came up with the mini ball.
Hmm.
So I don't think, I mean, he may have
I
misunderstood. I don't know if cartridges were
perhaps.
even made back then.
Yeah.
I know after the Civil War they came up with the Winchester repeating rifle, and that used
Hmm.
cartridges. But during the Civil War, I don't know. That's the only thing that makes me question. And again, he may have just wrote the wrong word down. You know, I don't know. But still, it's a freaky story. This guy comes up to him and hands him a box of bullets, basically, and then disappears.
Uh, Actually, they did have cartridges.
Okay, okay.
So yes,
Or maybe I'm
I've
thinking,
actually heard that story. I've read that story
huh?
somewhere. But that story also reminds me of a story from a place called Tunnel Hill, Georgia, where there's a train tunnel through one of the mountains there, and there was a battle fought there during the Civil War. The area is now preserved as a park, and there's a story that there were people hiking on the mountain, and as they were walking along the trail, they came across this man in a Civil War uniform asleep next to a tree. And he's laying there, he's propped up on his knapsack and just taking a nap. And so they quietly walked past him so as to not to disturb him. And then when they got back to the museum, they asked, well, are there supposed to be reenactors here today? And they said, we don't have any record of any reenactors. And
Wow.
so they went walking back to the site, and of course the guy is gone, and they did not encounter him elsewhere in the park.
Wow. That's cool.
Oh
And
yeah.
as I'm thinking about it, I getting my wars mixed up. I was thinking the Revolutionary Wars where they came up with the
Hmm.
mini ball. So my history was a little off, but it was a strange story. Now we want to go on to something a little different. This is one of these is really odd. This first one I'm going to share with you is really, really strange. We're talking about strange lights seen in the woods. These may or may not be. I mean, technically, I guess they could be UFOs, but whether they're craft or not, I don't know. These are just strange lights. But listen to this one. This one is totally out of the norm. This guy says 8 years ago, I was exploring the woods near the Chesapeake Bay, and I heard a crashing sound through the trees. I figured it was probably just a deer or something from the sound of it. And about an eighth of a mile in the distance through the trees, I saw two white lines. They were vertical, what looked like maybe 2 or 3 feet in height, and from what I could see, maybe a foot apart. They were moving to the right, and I could see them bobbing as they moved up and down. Now, here's the thing. These strange white lines were easily 10 to 15 feet in the air.
Hmm.
There's no animal that looks like that in North America. I was a teenager at the time, and I ran away as fast as I could from whatever it or they were.
Wow.
I've never heard anything like that.
Yeah.
I mean, he sees these lights. I would equate it to like fluorescent tubes.
Hmm.
He said about a foot apart. They were 2 to 3 feet. What? Yeah, 2 or 3 feet in height, about a foot
Yeah.
apart. And they were bobbing up and down as they moved through the woods, but they were 10 to 15 feet up in the air.
Hmm.
I've you've seen it in movies and stuff. Somebody's walking on the other side of the dark field and they're carrying a lantern and it's bobbing up and down, but that's only a few feet off I mean, it looks like a light by itself bobbing up and down, but if someone's carrying a lantern or a light, it's going to be up, but 10 to 15 feet off the ground.
Hmm.
Wow. All right, Lewis.
Okay. I used to frequent the top of this dam near Pollock Pines, California. I used to go there for the beautiful stars and quiet view of the river. My first time out, I saw these three red orbs doing this crazy cartwheeling dance across the sky before plunging down towards the canyon. I chalked it up to something like a fancy toy or something. You could see the red light bouncing off of the trees. I don't know. It looked cool though. I saw the orb several more times, and they didn't look connected. They kind of pulsed in and out from each other and did big loping arcs across the sky before streaking down the canyon. Every time I saw them. A few times, though, I don't know. Some were, they seemed to be made of other stuff that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up with no associated sense of fear. It was a
Whoa.
really weird feeling. I saw a bunch of blue globes, big globes of blue light moving slowly but in very odd patterns, too big and too linear of movements to be any kind of satellite I was aware of or I had ever seen. I saw the classic slow moving triangle with lights at its points, and I asked some people about it who lived in the area longer than I, and they just sort of shrugged, like, yep, that's a thing. Weird stuff. I still think it's some kind of military deal, but who knows?
Again, the people in the area, yep, that's a thing. That happens. So you saw
Hmm,
some lights. Okay, you know.
yeah.
Another person says, I live in the mountains, deep in the Sierra Nevada mountains in California. I have many, many stories of weird things happening in these woods, but one I'll tell tonight happened when I was involved in a sleepover camp. It happened when I was in sixth grade, when I was involved in a sleepover camp. We went to a sleepaway science camp for 3 days. The last night there, we went on a night hike. It was awesome. Flashlights and 30 somewhat kids chomping on wintergreen lifesavers in the dark, watching the sparks light up in their mouth. Did you ever do that as a kid?
I think that was after my time.
Okay. Well, I mean, I actually remembered it. I don't know if I've ever
Hmm.
done it, but I remembered talking about it when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Uh, she says, I started to get the feeling of being watched on the way back, and my skin started to prickle. She says, my dad was a park ranger at the time, and he would take me out into the woods growing up. I spent the first 4 years of my life in Yosemite. I know the deep woods, and most of the time I feel safe, even when alone. But that night, something was out there. Surrounded by my classmates, I felt scared. The camp had us sleeping in one big cabin in bunk beds. The beds were all along the windows. Huge dual windows, bottom and top bunk had their own window. I still felt scared and like I was being watched as I got ready for bed. When the lights went out, it took me a long time to fall asleep. Around 2 a.m., a bright light flashed in my eyes and woke me up. It was a pulsing red light. It hurt my eyes. As I was stirring, the sound of fingernails across the window hit me. And there, against the window, was a floating red orb, with hands reaching from the orb, touching the window. I couldn't scream. I just sat there with the sheets surrounding, watching my window flood with light and this orb coming towards me. I was on the top bunk, and the orb had no feet, no legs, just floating. And then all of a sudden, it was gone. I was not able to go back to sleep. The next morning, I chalked it up to my love of scary stories and convinced my 11-year-old self that I didn't see anything. It wasn't until I was on the bus coming home that I knew something strange had happened. Someone asked me if I knew what that red light was outside my window last night. Wow. So she got confirmation. She wasn't just making it up in her imagination. Somebody else saw the same thing. All right, next we're going to a strange phenomenon. Um, have you ever seen uh, the stairs to nowhere? Lewis, tell us about the first.
Okay. All right. A CDC officer who was a specialist in researching infectious diseases was investigating a case of animal mutilation after the Roswell crash in the 1940s. And they heard of a vanishing staircase in the woods. This group of CDC officials settled their camp near the random staircase in the forest, and then they spent the whole night and day nearby. However, the next morning, when they woke up, the staircase was not there. Instead, it was just a black burned area. They found out that the exact same staircase, they found the exact same staircase 50 meters away from that spot
Wow.
and were shocked about how it moved there. And then they decided to look into it. The wood of the stairs was harder and stronger than any wood available in the world. It wasn't even scratchable.
Wow.
The staircase moved 50 to 60 meters every other night, leaving the burnt spot, and after a week or so, it vanished. Researchers said the stairs emitted a frequency, but they were still unsure of the receivers.
Wow. And it moved every other night. That's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this is a phenomenon. I mean, you don't, uh, as cool as it is in fantasy books, you don't walk around the woods and find doors just
Hmm.
standing in there.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you don't find other architectural things unless it's an abandoned building or something, but you walk
Hmm.
out in the woods, and this has happened time and time and time again. People walk out and they
Yeah.
just see these stairs. They just go up and stop. And in most cases, there's no evidence of any building having been around it.
Hmm.
Once, this person says, once a ranger told me how he was training a rookie when they found some abandoned stairs in the forest. The rookie climbed up the stairs without thinking twice and held his hand out to touch a tree, but suddenly the hand was cut off by something extremely sharp because it was a clean cut wound. The creepy thing is that the hand was never found. Wow. Another ranger story is about the woman who climbed up the stairs and came back saying, "Something is wrong with me." And suddenly she fell from the stairs and died. The doctors later said she died due to a fatal aneurysm. And the rangers say they can't forget the way the blood leaked inside her eyes before she died.
Mm.
And one more story of a young rookie ranger who went on patrol and stumbled onto one of the stairs in the forest and decided to climb up and explore. But then he saw a vicious dog and didn't want to get bitten by him, so he ran back toward the ranger station. Once he got there, they told him that he had been fired because he had been missing the past 5 years.
Wow.
Wow. It's kind of like he went to a fairy ring or something. I don't know,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah, all he did was climb the stairs. There's another one coming up here in a second. Yeah, a girl played hide and seek. It's kind of a long story. We may condense
Mhm.
that, but uh, wow, missing 5 years. Or the man that reached up and got his hand cut off and they couldn't find the hand. Are we talking something extra dimensional here?
Wow.
A portal or a doorway? I don't know.
Mhm.
Tell us about the next one, Lewis.
Okay. I came across a set of stairs in rural West Virginia. I don't think I was quite 40 miles deep, but at least 10 or better. I thought maybe a house had once stood there, but there was no cellar or other debris that would indicate a home was there previously. Just a set of stairs with a base that went up perhaps one flight, 16 steps if I remember correctly, and sturdy. Could barely shake them. I didn't climb up though, worried it might break or fall over, and I was alone.
It's probably a good thing he didn't.
Hmm. Might have
And
gotten his hand cut off.
or disappeared for 5 years.
Yes.
An hour east of Ironwood, there is a clearing in the forest that has stairs. This person says, I was hiking and exploring with my cousins, and we stumbled on a clearing about half a football field in size. It had a few staircases and not against trees, just standing out in the open. They looked like stairs from a normal suburban home, kind of old though. My older cousin decided to investigate. He walked to the stairs to see how they were being held up, but couldn't find anything at all. He made us all leave. And one other thing that he mentioned was that grass didn't even grow near the stairs. From what it sounds like, these are stairs that just went up with nothing underneath them, no
Hmm.
support. Oh, that's wild.
Hmm.
Yeah. This next one is about the girl playing hide and seek, and it is a long one. Um, let me just cut to the chase here. She's from New York City, so she'd never been in the woods, and she was about 10 years old and went to visit some cousins. And so they were running around out in the woods and decided to play hide and seek. Uh, they drew sticks, and it was her turn to be the seeker as they started out, or as we used to call it when we were
Mhm.
kids. You're it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
and and so if you were it, you the one that had to count to 100 and then go find everybody. It reminds me of the night we were playing it in the yard. We had a big front yard, and we were playing flashlight hide and seek. Did you ever do
Yeah.
that in the dark? And everybody
Uh,
goes,
yeah.
well, our version was you go out in our big front yard. Whoever was it had to stand on the porch with a flashlight.
Mhm.
And a bunch of my friends were over, and they were out in the yard laying down. And I had the flashlight, and I was shining out. And the purpose was if you could identify who that person was, then they were it. But everybody was
Mhm.
laying down in the front yard, and you were supposed to shine the light and figure out who it was. Well, I had just started shining my light, and I heard one of the kids scream, and he jumps up, and then I see him run into the house. And as he's running to the house, clothing is flying off in different direction. And by the time he got to the house, he was butt naked because he had laid down in a fire ant bed.
Oh, of course. Mhm.
And he was stripping his clothes as he ran and slapping his body. Uh,
Oh, wow.
uh, yeah, he had a fun time there. Okay, the girl is it, and she says as she was counting is where it starts to get fuzzy. She finished up and she started walking away from the tree. Excuse me. She says she kind of spaced out and didn't notice how long or how far she was walking. She started to get scared and to panic. And but then she walked into this place and saw a random staircase. She says, yes, a staircase just sitting in the middle of the forest. I couldn't hear my parents, my uncle, my aunt, or my cousins, even the bird song and any sort of forest ambiance just went completely silent as I came across the staircase. She said it was about 12 steps high, white, with a railing, and looked extremely grimy and old. It looked like it had been there forever. It was covered with dirt and rust foliage. She said, being a stupid 10 years old, she decided to walk up the staircase because her first thought was maybe one of her cousins was hiding there. She said she put her foot on the first step and she began to hear this low buzzing frequency. She took another step and it got louder, another step and it got louder. By the time she reached the fifth step, she said it was so loud it sounded like buzzing, like a fly was in her ear, and she couldn't swat it away. By the seventh step, she couldn't take it anymore. She ran down the stairway as fast as she could and ran away from it. And she found her way back to the meadow where they had all been. She said her three cousins were there with their parents, a 5-year-old crying her eyes out as her mother tried to calm her down, and her dad was holding his phone like he was calling someone, and my mother looked pale. I thought she had seen a ghost. She said her mother saw her and came rushing. Said the blood came rushing back to her face, and she ran towards her, picked her up, and started crying into my shoulder. And Dad said into his phone, "Yes, we found her. It's okay now," and threw it to the ground and hugged me too. She said, I was so confused, and even though the weird frequency went away, I still felt nauseous and ended up throwing up on my mother's sneakers. I asked what happened, and my dad told me. Apparently, my cousins were all behind nearby trees, and they watched me walk in the wrong direction and assumed I'd come back later. Apparently, I had been gone for almost 2 hours, even though it felt like 20 minutes to me.
Wow.
My cousins ran back to the adults, assuming I would come back there, and when they explained, my dad panicked and called the police. I explained what happened with the staircase in as much detail as possible, and since my mom had always been a spiritual person, she told me to lead them there. I walked in the exact same direction, and when I got to what I swear on my life was the spot, the staircase was gone. The trees and the foliage around it looked exactly the same. There was even a dent in the dirt where that staircase should have been, but it had literally disappeared.
Hmm.
She says her mom wrote it off that she must have tripped and fallen asleep and had a dream. So we all went back to the car and went home. Wild.
Wow.
She said, to this day, I have no idea what that staircase was, but I know it was not natural. It was alive. And to this day, anytime I think I'm going back to Colorado, I get that same feeling. Well, yeah.
Wow.
Along that same line,
Structures which have been the structures range in size but have all been constructed out of fallen trees and limbs, with some reaching over 20 feet tall and dozens of feet in diameter. They may have been as many as 1,000 pieces of wood in them. The wood is seasoned and dry, and the design is similar to a classic kindling pyramid, but on a much larger scale. And to
wow.
exacerbate the obvious fire danger, people appeared to be using fire rings inside many of the structures.
Wow. And they are, I mean, they kind of remind me, whoops, there's the stairs. They kind of remind me
Oh,
of the Bigfoot structures people have claimed to have seen.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
But these are almost like somebody's building a teepee out in the woods, but
yeah.
that's just
Wow.
wild. Well, we're going to go on to one other section before we close it out today,
Okay.
and that's strange creatures. Now, the first one is really weird. The Yucca Man of Joshua Tree is a legend that began in 1971 when a Marine guarding the base at 29 Palms was attacked by what he claimed was a gigantic hairy man coming out of the darkness. The Marine ordered the creature to halt, threatening with its rifle, but it took the rifle from him, bent it in half, and knocked the Marine unconscious.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
8 years later, a couple claims they were driving to their Desert Springs condo one night when a huge man with long tan hair stepped out from behind a yucca bush in front of their car, stopping them. They claimed the creature's chest was the size of a refrigerator and had long arms that hung below its knees.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, typical Bigfoot sighting, if you ask me, but I've never heard of one bending a rifle in half. So, all right, tell us about the one in North Carolina, Lewis.
Okay, in Transylvania, North Carolina, a young man out hunting in the woods with his dog Duke came upon a place in the old quarry that looked to be a very good spot to stop and stake out the watering hole at the other end. As he sat down, Duke raised himself off the ground and raised every hackle on his back. Standing no more than 30 feet from the hunter and his dog was a creature of unknown description. The creature had the horns of a goat, the head of a mountain lion, the body of a bear, the hooves and tail of a horse. And the hunter shot at it dead center between the eyes, and the creature fell dead before his feet.
Wow.
For 3 days, the hunter, accompanied by his dog, took the creature up and down the country roads that surrounded his home to show off this unusual kill. On the third night, the creature disappeared and has been seen in the Williamson Creek, Rich Mountain, and Cedar Mountain areas. Some say the creature was stolen by a jealous or spiteful hunter or collector, but others say it still is alive.
Oh, wow. So that shot between the eyes may have been like the Beast of Gévaudan, where
Mhm.
you'd shoot it and it may knock it out or whatever, and you think it's dead, but then
Yeah.
it awakes again a little while later,
Oh, yeah.
you know. But how weird is that? It's almost like the Jersey Devil, where it's
Mhm.
got all these different body parts, you know, like
Oh,
some kind
yeah.
of chimera. You
Yeah.
know, the where did it say? Yeah, horns of a goat, head of a mountain lion, body of a bear, the hooves and tail of a horse.
Mhm.
Wow. All right. This next one person says, my strange story took place on the 26th of September, 2009. My church was on a retreat in Indiana in the forest. The place we stayed at was a small building in the center of the forest. We decided that evening to go out and play in the forest with the children, so we came up with a game to play. It was like police. The kids were the police, and we would pick an adult to be the hostage. So I'm assuming the other kids kept that person hostage, and the police were to go find them or whatever, kind of a hide and seek. Well, when we began the game, we had to find the adult hiding in the forest in the middle of the night. So we started going around the back of the building, and we spotted a tall figure. It had to be at least 6 feet tall. It was running toward the trees. There was a small open area with tall grass that goes up to your knees. It ran with its arms at its sides, but it stopped at the edge of the tall grass as if to wait for us to get closer. We chased after it, thinking it was the adult, and when we were finally a few yards away, it dove into the grass and started to crawl very fast, almost snake-like. We got weirded out, but stood there staring at it. When it got across the tall grass, it began to climb a tree. It looked somewhat like a deformed cat-like animal when it was climbing. Then a few moments later, a kid yelled, "I see him," and was pointing in the opposite direction. We saw a similar figure running a couple of yards away, so we chased it. But then it vanished behind a tree. Then a few minutes later, we found the adult hiding in the parking lot in front of the building the whole time. So who knows what we saw that night in the forest? At least 15 kids saw the things with me. So I know I'm not crazy. Wow. Kind of reminded me, I don't know why, because I meant to mention this in the earlier. We didn't talk about our last show, 1973, the year of the humanoids. The show I ended with on that one was the guy saw the being on his back porch, looked like he was in a Tyvek suit or something, and holding what looked like a giant metal direct detector and a fishbowl on his head. Yeah. And when he turned on the light, the guy just turned around and flashed him a peace sign. And I thought that was hilarious. It was one of my favorite sighting stories. But he flashed him the peace sign, turned around and walked toward the back fence, walked up the back fence, over it, and then a few minutes later, he saw him flying away in a craft, and waved bye to him because he saw it. But I thought that was so wild. Flashed him the peace sign. It's like, hey, dude, it's all right, you know.
Yeah.
All right, one last story before we close it out today, Lewis.
Okay. While working for the National Forest Service, one firefighter was driving to a site, and along the way, a bobcat appeared in the middle of the road, stared at him for about 10 seconds, screamed at him, and finally ran up a tree. It was odd behavior, but he kept driving. About a half mile down the road, he finds a well boarded up cabin. Since it was federal land, this structure shouldn't have been there at all, so he decided to head back. On the way back, he saw a Native American woman in tattered clothes near where the bobcat had been seen. When he asked if she needed help, she screamed at him in the same scream as the bobcat, and then climbed unnaturally fast up the tree. Later, a local Native American man informed him that he had seen a warg or skin changer in the area.
Wow. So possibly, I mean, you know, I mean, I know bobcats, we've talked about it on the show before. Bobcats can sound like a woman screaming.
Oh, yeah.
So did he really see a skin changer, a skin walker, a shapeshifter? Did he see that? Or was it just coincident that the bobcat and the woman were in the basically similar locations, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't see them change, but it was just very coincidental that he sees the bobcat, it screams at him. He comes back, and in about the same location, he sees a woman, and she screams at him. Same scream.
Oh, yeah.
So could be. Well, Lewis, any final thoughts?
Well, it's not hard to imagine that with all of the tremendous acreage taken up by national parks and state parks, that there's got to be all types of mysterious things, especially deep in these wilderness
Yeah.
areas. So
Yeah.
these stories are not at all unexpected.
True. True. And a lot of them come from ancient legends,
Hmm.
mythology, and some of these you just if you sat down there and broke them down, you could say, well, that was actually this or that was actually this. But one thing I have always stated since this show began, and that's why on this show especially, I wanted to give people who had actually experienced these things and witnessed these things and tell their stories. Because I mean, we could sit here all day long and say, well, it's this, or this, and that's fine. If you want to do that, it's you've got to keep an open mind. You've got to be a skeptic to some degree. But on the other hand, if someone tells you this happened to me, I can't judge their sincerity. You know, I mean, I have to take it at face value. If it comes out later that they were lying, then so be it. But at the
Yeah.
moment they tell the story, I have to accept them. I may not accept the story as being real,
Mhm.
but I have to accept the fact that to that person it was real. You know,
Yes.
did they
Yeah.
see a UFO? Did they experience an alien abduction? I can't say that it really happened, but if they're telling me this is what happened to me, I have to accept that. And whether you believe the actual experience, you can believe the person. So
Hmm.
that's where I stand on all this. You know, I think it's wild that that we've got these stories. The the men in black out in the wilderness. That's just whether it was actually the men in black, I don't know. But coming
Yeah.
across that I mean, some of these are just so far out there.
Hmm.
Is so unique. So, but there
Oh
you
yeah.
have it, watchers. Strange tales from the Trail of Shadows. What are your thoughts? Have you been on that trail? Have you seen strange things in the woods? Comment below. Contact us with your strange journeys in the forest. And remember to hit that like and subscribe button before you close out today. And we sure appreciate you being here. And we thank you for joining us, and we wish you safe but strange journeys. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Goodbye. Thank you,
Good
Lewis.
night. Thank
Great
you.
stories. Bye bye.
Bye.